Millennial and Gen Zs are reshaping the world. News Generation shares their fresh perspectives on what's trending now. From global developments to everyday culture, we're diving into the stories that matter. This is News Generation.
On his final day in Manila, President Lee Jae-myung attended the Korea-Philippines Business Forum, where he underscored the significance of deepening bilateral cooperation in manufacturing, energy, and infrastructure. As Operation Epic Fury's escalation in the Middle East conflict enters its fifth day, U.S. and Israeli forces have stepped up strikes on Iranian military and strategic targets, including missile launchers and air defense systems, as the broader confrontation with Iran intensifies. South Korea's benchmark KOSPI sank for a second consecutive session, tumbling more than 12% on Wednesday amid fears of war. Trading on both the KOSPI and the secondary co-stock markets was temporarily halted. We begin with President Lee Jae-myung's day 2 of his state visit to the Philippines. He attended a business forum where he called for deeper bilateral cooperation in manufacturing, energy, and infrastructure. Our Blue House correspondent Song Yoo-jin starts us off.
Manufacturing, energy, and infrastructure. What President Lee Jae-myung sees as the driving forces of cooperation between South Korea and the Philippines.
그동안 양국 관계가 굳건히 발전해온 데에는 오늘 이 자리에 계시는 경제인 여러분의 역할이 매우 컸다는 점을 알고 있습니다. 앞으로도 통찰력 있는 판단과 과감한 도전으로 새로운 기회를 열어주시기를 부탁드립니다.
During his final day in Manila, President Lee took part in the Korea-Philippines Business Forum. The event brought together government officials and major business leaders from both countries. They include the heads of South Korea's Lotte Group and HD Hyundai, as well as the Philippines' SM Prime Holdings and Alliance Global. In his congratulatory remarks, Lee highlighted the strong potential for the two countries to join hands in manufacturing by leveraging their respective strengths.
필리핀은 니켈, 코발트 같은 핵심 광물을 보유하고 있으며 한국은 반도체와 전기, 전자 등 첨단 산업 제조 기술을 가지고 있습니다. 조선 분야 역시 협력 잠재력이 매우 큽니다.
On energy, Lee said South Korea could play a key role in the Philippines' plan to introduce commercial nuclear power plants by 2032, citing Korea's world-class reactor technology and clean energy capabilities. Regarding infrastructure, he expressed confidence that logistics projects modernizing ports and railways in the Philippines involving Korean firms will boost the local economy once completed. Wednesday's forum resulted in the signing of 7 memorandums of understanding.
All of these will ripple into significant partnerships that will generate projects, investments, and, of course, livelihood.
Among them are agreements to introduce new nuclear power plants and train skilled shipbuilding workers in the Philippines. The Blue House says the Korea-Philippines Business Forum marks the first business gathering of its kind in the ASEAN region since President Lee took office last June. This underscores the Philippines' growing importance as a key economic partner for South Korea in ASEAN. 송유진, Arirang News.
Also, on his final day in Manila, President Lee Jae-myung met Koreans living in the Philippines and vowed to make greater efforts to protect them from crimes. President Lee also thanked the Philippine government and President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. for creating a Korean help desk at local police offices for the safety of Koreans. He added that he has asked for help from the Philippine government to extradite a Korean national who is currently in prison in the Philippines to South Korea at an early date, adding that the person has reportedly been managing the export of drugs to Korea from behind bars via telegram. The situation in the Middle East is intensifying as the U.S. and Israel exchange a direct fire with Iran. While the Pentagon has confirmed the first American combat fatalities following an Iranian drone strike on a U.S. military facility in Kuwait, over in Iran, the death toll is nearing 800 following joint strikes on the country's nuclear facilities and leadership targets. Our Kim Do-yeon has the latest.
With the Operation Epic Fury entering its fifth day, the U.S. and Israel have targeted Iran's strategic assets. The Israel Defense Forces announced it destroyed the secret Menzadai underground nuclear facility east of Tehran, stating the site was used to develop key components for nuclear weapons.
In these headquarters, a group of nuclear scientists operated covertly, advancing and developing capabilities and knowledge towards obtaining nuclear weapons.
The International Atomic Energy Agency also confirmed that joint strikes damaged the entrance buildings of the Natanz fuel enrichment plant, though the watchdog noted no radiological consequences are expected. The U.S. military stated that joint U.S. and Israeli forces have struck over 1,700 targets across Iran within 72 hours of the operation's start. Washington has deployed B-2 stealth bombers and B-52 long-range strategic bombers, which are capable of carrying bunker-buster munitions to intensify strikes on Iran's underground infrastructure. In retaliation, Iran has launched a counteroffensive firing ballistic missiles at the Israeli mainland. Iranian drones have targeted U.S. military bases and diplomatic outposts, striking installations in Qatar, Bahrain, and the United Arab Emirates and Kuwait. The exchanges have resulted in a growing number of casualties. The Pentagon has confirmed the first American combat fatalities, announcing that 6 U.S. soldiers were killed and at least 18 others wounded in drone strike at Port Shuaibah in Kuwait. At least 10 people have been killed in Israel. In Iran, the death toll has reached 787 according to the Iranian Red Crescent as of Wednesday morning local time. The figure includes Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei and Davoud Ali Zadeh, a senior commander of the Quds Force. The U.S. and Israel also bombed the Assembly of Experts building in Qom, while the senior clerics are tasked with choosing a new supreme leader. Amid the power vacuum, the New York Times reports that Mojtaba Khamenei, the late Ayatollah's second son, is the most likely successor. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Now, the Trump administration's narrative surrounding the ongoing conflict with Iran is shifting. U.S. President Donald Trump and his top officials are offering evolving justifications for the preemptive military strikes, prompting the Secretary of State to publicly backtrack on Capitol Hill. Jung Hae-rim reports.
U.S. President Donald Trump says he believed Iran was preparing to strike first, describing that assessment as a key reason for launching the U.S. military campaign, adding that the U.S. drove the timeline.
It was my opinion that they were going to attack first. They were going to attack. If we didn't do it, they were going to attack first. I felt strongly about that. And based on the way the negotiation was going, I think they were going to attack first. And I didn't want that to happen. So if anything, I might have forced Israel's hand.
During an interview with ABC News, Trump also suggested that Iran attempted to assassinate him and argued the strikes were necessary to eliminate what he called imminent threats from Tehran. Speaking to reporters ahead of classified briefings on Capitol Hill on Tuesday, Secretary of State Marco Rubio insisted that Trump decided Iran could no longer hide behind its missile program. He also stated the bottom line was that the U.S. determined it was not going to get hit first. But Rubio's explanation appeared to contrast with remarks he made earlier on Monday when he said the United States acted partly because it expected Israel to strike Iran and feared Tehran would retaliate against American forces. This contradiction has fueled debate among analysts over whether the imminent threat to the U.S. was genuine. Meanwhile, questions are mounting over the administration's long-term objectives. Trump has actively urged Iranians to overthrow their government, but stated otherwise on who would be the next leader.
Well, most of the people we had in mind are dead. So, we had some in mind from that group that is dead.
With shifting timelines and evolving justifications from top officials, the Trump administration's endgame in the Middle East remains increasingly uncertain. 정혜림, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, the South Korean government has evacuated around 140 of its citizens and ethnic Koreans from Iran and Israel to neighboring countries, and is preparing further measures to help travelers who remain stranded in the region. Lee Seung-jae has more.
South Korea's foreign ministry says about 140 South Koreans and ethnic Koreans have safely evacuated from Iran and Israel to neighboring countries. According to the ministry on Tuesday, 24 people in Iran, including South Korean nationals, departed Tehran early Tuesday aboard buses arranged by the Korean embassy. After traveling east and staying overnight at a stopover, they crossed the border Wednesday evening and safely entered Turkmenistan. The evacuees include Korean residents, several embassy staff and their family members, as well as some Iranian nationals who are relatives of Korean citizens. Among those who left Iran were Iranian women's national volleyball team coach Lee Do-hee and footballer Lee Gi-jae, who plays for an Iranian club. Meanwhile, 66 others in Israel were evacuated to Egypt. They departed Tel Aviv and Jerusalem on embassy-arranged buses, with additional short-term visitors joining them at the border, bringing the total to 113 evacuees. They have safely cleared the Israel-Egypt border crossing and will travel to Cairo, with support from embassy officials and a rapid response team dispatched from Seoul. The foreign ministry says it will continue exploring additional evacuation options if needed, and stressed it remains committed to ensuring the safety of South Korean nationals in the region. Prime Minister Kim Min-seok has also instructed officials to prepare measures for short-term travelers in the Middle East who are stranded due to airport closures, suggesting that military transport aircraft could be deployed if necessary.
I ask that you thoroughly prepare guidance for short-term visitors returning home, provide consular assistance, and ensure transportation plans are in place in case of emergencies.
The Defense Ministry says it's preparing to immediately deploy military transport aircraft if the government requests support. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
And President Lee Jae-myung will convene an extraordinary cabinet meeting on Thursday to discuss the situation in the Middle East. According to the Blue House, the president will receive briefings from the finance and foreign affairs ministries and discuss the potential impact on South Korea, as well as possible response measures. Lee, who is currently on a 4-day trip to Southeast Asia, has instructed the government to maintain an emergency response system led by Prime Minister Kim Min-seok. Now, with a conflict escalating in the Middle East, the long-term effects may ripple to other countries, including the Korean Peninsula. Though direct military conflict is unlikely, political and strategic consequences may follow. An Sung-jin explains.
U.S. military operations against Iran came amid ongoing nuclear negotiations and are allegedly aimed at regime change. However, the effect of these will echo far beyond the Middle East. The crisis does not immediately raise the risk of a direct military conflict on the Korean Peninsula, but it may raise alarms from two different aspects, reshaping the broader strategic and military landscapes on the Korean Peninsula. Developments in the Middle East could further harden the confrontation between the U.S. and its alliances, including South Korea and Japan on one side, and North Korea, China, and Russia on the other.
The situation in Iran right now is leading to a power balance struggle. What happens there isn't only affecting Western nations, but it will also influence other U.S. alliances in Asia, which may reshape the regional power dynamic.
Such polarization may reinforce North Korea's nuclear strategy, deepening long-term tensions on the Korean Peninsula. And this intersects with the Trump administration's push for strategic flexibility of the U.S. forces Korea. This initiative seeks to expand the operational scope of American troops stationed in South Korea from beyond deterring North Korea to deployments across the broader Indo-Pacific region. If the conflict is further prolonged in Iran, some USFK assets could be redeployed to the Middle East, hurting the peninsula's security posture.
What we might need is a careful understanding of the initiative and, if needed, looking for ways to amend it.
Bilateral security negotiations between Seoul and Washington are also showing signs of strain, with initiatives on nuclear-powered submarines and revisions to the bilateral nuclear cooperation agreement allegedly being delayed again. The planned visit to South Korea by the U.S. negotiating delegation was initially set for January, but was postponed to late February or early March. This, too, had been recently rescheduled for mid-March following U.S.-bound investment issues. However, with the U.S. strike on Iran, overall consultations on alliance security cooperation have been put on hold. Tensions in the Middle East are less likely to produce a direct conflict on the Korean Peninsula. But Seoul may have to brace itself for a more unpredictable security environment with heightened strategic uncertainty on the peninsula in the months ahead. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
Also Monday, South Korea's stock market has posted its steepest drop on record. Investment sentiment froze amid growing fears that the Middle East situation could turn into a prolonged crisis. Kim Junong has the details.
War fears in Iran sent shockwaves through South Korea's stock market, leaving the country's benchmark indexes with double-digit losses. The KOSPI opened 3.4% lower and extended losses through the morning, eventually triggering a circuit breaker after the index stayed down more than 8% for over a minute, halting trading for 20 minutes. The index closed at 5,093.54, plummeting more than 12% from the previous session and falling back to the 5,000 level. The Kosdaq also remains under pressure. The index opened 2.25% lower than the previous day and extended its losses, triggering its first sell-side sidecar of the year. The decline continued, eventually prompting a circuit breaker late in the morning and sending the index below the 1,000 level. With Middle East tensions shaking markets across Asia, attention is turning to why South Korea's stock market has been hit particularly hard.
Among major energy-dependent economies, South Korea's market had risen the most since the start of the year. The recent decline reflects a pullback from those gains.
Major heavyweights, including Samsung Electronics, SK Hynix, and Hyundai Motor, all moved lower, while defense stocks that had surged the previous day fell sharply on profit-taking. Unlike Tuesday, when bargain buying briefly appeared, selling pressure continued on Wednesday as market anxiety intensified. Despite the steep decline, analysts say a rebound remains possible, depending on additional triggers.
If some of the uncertainties begin to ease or a trigger emerges, a quick recovery seems possible. In that process, foreign buying will be crucial, and that will largely depend on moves in the $1 exchange rate.
Meanwhile, the Korean won briefly rose above 1,500 during trading, meeting one of the worst-case conditions, while uncertainty remains over how the Middle East conflict and global oil prices will unfold. Kim Junong, Arirang News.
U.S. strikes on Iran are sending shockwaves across the globe, with major implications for China, Russia, and North Korea. For more on this, we have our defense correspondent Kim Bo-kyung here in the studio. Welcome back, Bo-kyung.
Thanks for having me, Dami.
So, Bo-kyung, let's start with China. Many experts say that U.S. strikes against Iran could actually pressure China in many ways. Could you elaborate on this?
Right. So Washington's military action against Iran counters China both politically and economically. You see, Iran is a key member of the groups led by China, the BRICS and Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and has been one of China's key partners. So an Iran under attack could weaken China's influence in global geopolitics. Not just that, as Iran is at the center of China's ambitious One Belt, One Road initiative, tensions in the Middle East could also hinder China's grand plan. Here's what an expert said.
The Belt and Road includes both land and sea routes. The land route goes from China through Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, and Iran to Europe, but it's now blocked. Since the U.S. is targeting China's key partners, this could deal a serious diplomatic blow to China.
Economically, too, China is a huge buyer of Iranian oil, having imported more than 1 million barrels of Iranian crude oil per day on average last year, according to research firm Kepler, accounting for more than 80% of Iran's seaborne oil exports. Thus, if Iranian oil supplies are disrupted, Beijing would have to face higher energy import costs, leading to inflation and causing economic difficulties.
When oil prices go up, insurance costs rise, and higher production costs push up overall prices. If Iran, which has served as an alternative energy route, is blocked, it will affect not only China's military, but also its economy and defense industry, both directly and indirectly.
So the situation in the Middle East could turn into a risk for China, but on the other hand, for Russia, Russia can benefit from the tensions in the region. Tell us more.
Right. So if the Strait of Hormuz gets fully blocked, China would have to find alternative oil suppliers. In that sense, countries, not just China, but also India, would have to increase their imports of Russian crude. Russia already benefited earlier this year after the U.S. action in Venezuela. So Moscow may be hoping for similar conditions again. And the expert also noted that Russia maintains working relations with all parties involved right now, the U.S., Iran, and Israel, which could position Moscow to act as a potential mediator. And we should not forget that the war in Ukraine is still ongoing. As global attention shifts to the Middle East, Ukraine risk could be pushed out of the spotlight, a situation that could once again work in Russia's favor. Take a listen.
Because of this war, the conflict in Ukraine is being overshadowed, and many of the massive weapon supplies that were going to Ukraine are now being redirected to the Middle East. In that sense, Russia's position in the current situation is not unfavorable.
Right, we shouldn't forget the war in Ukraine isn't over yet. Now, when it comes to North Korea, you reported yesterday that the tensions in the Middle East could deem the North Korea-U.S. talks. Tell us more about that.
Right, so let me first talk about the response of North Korea after the U.S.'s strike on Iran. North Korea strongly condemned the U.S. on Sunday, right after the U.S. launched an attack, calling the strikes gangster-like conduct.
Right.
Though the tone was very much moderated, as the statement did not directly mention Trump's name. But apart from that, as you have already mentioned, pundits say the chances of potential talks between Kim and Trump have become very slim, as attacks on Iran after failed nuclear negotiations would have eroded North Korea's trust in talks with Washington, likely pushing the regime to strengthen its nuclear program. This is what a North Korea expert said.
Although the regime is trying not to provoke the Trump administration, Kim believes that nuclear deterrence is the only way for the North to survive. It sees strengthening its second strike capability as the only way to prevent Trump from miscalculating or taking one-side military action.
Well, we would, of course, have to see what kind of decision Kim Jong-un makes in the future. But for now, it seems Kim is going to still hold on to the nuke programs and will not decide to come out to the negotiating table.
I see. Bo-kyung, thank you for the coverage tonight. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
South Korea's rival parties have agreed to fast-track a special bill aimed at facilitating large-scale investment in the U.S., citing concerns that further delays could invite a trade retaliation. On Wednesday, the National Assembly Special Committee handling said legislation began formal negotiations on 9 related bills, with both sides aiming to end the review process by March 9th. Lawmakers say a broad consensus has already been reached on major issues, including transparency, oversight, and whether to establish a separate investment entity. The agreement comes following concerns that delays could trigger strong trade retaliation from Washington amid heightened global tensions, including conflict involving the U.S. and Iran. The start of a new school semester isn't just exciting for young students. It also marks a fresh beginning for manhakdos, or students who study at a later age. Women who were unable to finish school earlier in life for various reasons are now returning to the classroom, proving it's never too late to learn. Our Cho Young-un has our story.
In class, students repeat after the teacher, carefully spelling out the English alphabet for the very first time. Laughter and smiles fill the room as they explore subjects that once felt out of reach, but long sparked their curiosity. Among them is 87-year-old Kim Moon-ja, clutching her pen, excited for her very first day of school. Though she began her education later than most, there's no shortage of enthusiasm.
I have to study hard, because if someone else learns 10 letters, I need to make at least one of them truly mine, so I have to keep trying my best.
Kim was forced to stop her early school education at a time when many girls were unable to continue their studies. As a teenager, she lived through the Korean War, carrying responsibilities that were far beyond her years. Instead of going to school, she worked to support her family and made sure her children received the education she couldn't. So now, even lingering injuries cannot dampen her determination to learn. These adult learners, known in Korean as manhakdo, are returning to school later in life, proving that it is never too late to begin again. Many of these women who have spent much of their lives as housewives are now in their 40s, 50s, or even 80s, and are finally pursuing the education they once had to set aside.
When a new semester begins, new students enroll and bring their dreams with them. I see it as an opportunity to help them achieve those dreams, which makes me feel very happy and excited.
For these high school students, this is more than just the start of a new semester in education. It is the beginning of a long-delayed dream. Cho Young-un, Arirang News.
Most regions had pleasant spring weather despite big gaps in readings. And tomorrow marks Gyeongchip, a seasonal milestone signaling the awakening of insects. And it's going to turn even warmer during the day before a brief cool snap arrives this weekend. Meanwhile, dust levels could rise tonight to the west of central regions, and it could stay dusty through tomorrow morning. And unlike today, we'll have cloudy skies in the capital area all day tomorrow. And Seoul, Daegu, and Gwangju will begin the day at 2 degrees Celsius. Then by the afternoon, Seoul will make it to 14 degrees Celsius. Jeju will get up to 15 degrees. And there is rain or snow in the forecast in central regions and the Jeollado provinces starting late tomorrow night, expanding nationwide by the following morning, but mostly clearing by the afternoon. With that in mind, here's a look at the international weather conditions.
That is all we have for tonight. I'm Kim Dami. From all of us here at Arirang, thanks for watching and good night.
Knock knock! The magical door to the world of K-animation is swinging wide open. Meet your instant new BFF, the adorable Catch. Tina Ping will have you hooked from the very first glance. Need a hand? Our Robocar Poli Rescue team is always zooming in to save the day. How about tagging along on Pinkfong and Pal's super exciting quest to reclaim their lost magic? With the mysterious life forms Kabion by your side, you can become a Kabion master and save humanity like the total hero. Protecting children's innocence while igniting their boundless imaginations. That's the magic of Korean animation. K-animation, the ultimate bestie for kids worldwide.
Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mo-gen. South Korean President Lee Jae-myung has wrapped up a 4-day state visit to Singapore and the Philippines, placing future industries and strategic security front and center. The trip highlighted cooperation in artificial intelligence, nuclear energy, defense, and supply chains, sectors seen as critical to South Korea's next phase of growth. It's also unfolded against a backdrop of intensifying U.S.-China competition and rising tensions in the South China Sea and growing concerns over global energy and logistics risks. With ASEAN increasingly important to Seoul's economic and security strategy, attention now turns to what these agreements truly mean, not just diplomatically, but for long-term economic resilience, regional stability, and new opportunities for Korean businesses. For a deeper discussion on this, we are joined here in the studio by Sung-Soo Eric Kim, adjunct professor at Yonsei Graduate School of Business and founder and CEO of DataCrunch Global. Very big welcome, Professor.
Thank you for having me tonight.
And also joining us online is Lee Jae-hyun, professor, principal fellow at Asan Institute for Policy Studies. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Lee.
Good evening. Thanks so much for having me.
So let's start with Professor Kim with the economic picture, of course. So President Lee has wrapped up his 4-day state visit to Singapore and the Philippines. Like I've said, how would you assess the economic outcomes of the latest visits?
So I think that we made very important dialogues between Korea and Singapore and also Korea and Philippines. To summarize, we focused on AI collaboration and SMR collaboration, and also green economy, and also some defense discussions with Philippines. So I think that it's very important because we're focusing on Southeast Asia, which we need to strategically partner with. Our view of the world is more focused on United States or China or Europe, but we have to recognize the importance of collaborating with Southeast Asia. Especially Southeast Asia is very favorable to Korea because of K-pop. And now I think that we have to leverage that relationship to a more stronger science and economic partnership.
Do you also see it as a shift in South Korea's current economic strategy?
Yes, I think that our economic strategy, as I mentioned before, is very focused to the United States and China and also Europe. But because of the U.S.-China conflict, we have to diversify our economic partners. It's very risky to concentrate in a couple of countries because the geopolitics is shifting, as we see in the U.S.-Iran war, and also our experience from the pandemic and the Ukraine-Russian war. So the global supply chain is changing and the economic territory is changing. So according to the change of the world, there's a higher need to diversify our economic portfolio. So in that sense, I think that's a good strategical shift and focus.
So kind of an economic pivot adapting to the current uncertain geopolitical situation. Now, when we turn to defense and security, Dr. Lee, what would you identify as the key achievements in that sector? You know, in particular, the Philippines is South Korea's largest defense partner in Southeast Asia. How has mutual trust between the two been built over time?
So I guess your question has got two different elements. First, the most important achievement in this summit between Korea and the Philippines. And the second part is the trust building between Korea and the Philippines. Right. Let me answer the second part first. The trust building, especially in the area of defense and security cooperation between Korea and the Philippines, it goes all the way back to Korean War, when the Philippines sent troops to the Korean War. And the Philippines was the first Asian country to send their troops to the Korean War. But the current wave of security and defense cooperation between Korea and the Philippines, it started in the 1990s when South Korea first transferred some old Navy ships to the Philippines. And then Philippines started to buy new naval ships from Korean companies like HD Hyundai and so on. And even the Philippines acquired new jet fighters like FA-50. And the cooperation even spread out to the non-traditional security area between the Coast Guard of the two countries. And now today we see a lot of high-level exchange between the Ministry of Defense of the two countries and also the high level of two militaries. The first question about the key achievement in this meeting between President Lee Jae-myung and the Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. The most significant development was that there was MOU between the two countries that South Korea will participate in the military modernization program of the Philippines, which is called Horizon, which is in the third phase. And it opens new opportunity for South Korea to transfer more naval ships as well as the state-of-the-art aircraft to the Philippine Air Force.
Right, so these kinds of exchanges continuing from decades before, it definitely dealt a big blow in building trust between the two countries. Now to Professor Kim, let's turn to supply chains and trade, of course. Korea and Singapore plan to upgrade their FTA, one of the biggest accomplishments at this latest summit, especially in supply chains and green economy, of course. With U.S. and China rivalry reshaping global trade, how significant is this supply chain cooperation?
So the Korea-Singapore Free Trade Agreement was, concluded 20 years ago when Korea used to do direct trades with China. And also at that time, Singapore was not the significant logistic hub in Southeast Asia as it has the position right now. So a lot of things have changed over the 2 decades. So the bilateral, agreement towards a new free trade agreement is trying to incorporate that reality, especially China, because of the US-China conflict. China is detouring exports through Singapore, which is a significant volume. So those kind of reality, and over the 20 years, green economy has become a really big agenda. So how do we incorporate that into FTA is also a big discussion. To make it as a reality, we also have to take in mind of the U.S. Tariff policies and how it unfolds with other countries. Because ultimately, even though we build a supply chain friendly FTA with Singapore, most of their trade volumes are detouring through Singapore. So still the FTA issue with the United States will limit what we can do. So we have to take a close watch of how the situation unfolds.
Right, definitely. The trade war from the United States, it's really dealing a big blow to many countries. We'll have to keep close tabs on that. But shifting gears a little bit, with rising tensions in the South China Sea and growing risks to sea lanes, energy and logistics, Dr. Lee, how important is cooperation between South Korea and ASEAN, and how can this relationship be strengthened?
Okay, let me first emphasize the importance of the South China Sea and the sea route in the Southeast Asia for South Korea's economy. And our seaborne trade and a lot of a portion of energy import actually passes through the South China Sea. So if there's any military clash in the South China Sea, we will see another big kind of a crisis, energy and oil crisis that we faced many years ago. And as you know, the current war and the military action happening in Iran, it puts a lot of pressure on South Korea's economy. And if there's any problem in the South China Sea, the same situation will repeat, I guess. The middle power cooperation to keep the peace and stability in the South China Sea. A lot of people actually talk about middle power cooperation, but nobody really comes out with a clear alternative how to keep it. We have to remember this: the Philippines, Singapore, whole Southeast Asia, as well as South Korea, or even Japan and Australia. These middle powers in the Pacific, they all achieved their democracy and economic development under the what we call rules-based order, which keeps lead on the big powers' unilateral behavior in the region. So anyhow, we have to remember that this maintaining and sustaining rules-based order is very important. If we have agreement on this keeping rules-based order in the region, it may have keeping peace and stability in the South China Sea as well. And as far as South Korea is concerned, what is really important is that the South Korea have to show its political will to make a genuine contribution for the peace and security in the region. I'm not saying that South Korea has to involve directly and militarily in the South China Sea problem, but there are many ways. For example, enhancing the military capability of the ASEAN countries so that they can manage on their own national security issues. That's one of the ways. So it is very important for South Korea to keep that promise and the political momentum to engage in the defense and security of Southeast Asian countries.
So middle power cooperation and coordination seems increasingly vital at this point. Now, Dr. Lee, we are aware that the South Korea and Philippines, they share a long history. And like you've said, the Philippines deployed troops for South Korea during the war. Now, nowadays, defense ties are also expanding beyond arms sales to broader security cooperation. What do you think is needed to make that sustainable? And do you think this trip helped deepen that kind of trend?
Yeah, of course. As I mentioned, in this trip to Philippines, President Lee Jae-myung made defense and the defense industry cooperation kind of central agenda of the bilateral cooperation. And then there are ways for South Korea and the Philippines to put their hands together to keep that momentum of defense and security cooperation. For example, South Korea has got the advanced defense industry technology, and it is a good idea to transfer this technology to the Philippines as well as some Southeast Asian countries. If we transfer the defense technology to the ASEAN countries, it may have impact on the manufacturing sector of those countries so that they can even make their economic growth. And the second point is also the what we call MRO, maintenance, repair, and overhaul. As I mentioned, there are quite a number of naval ships and aircraft we transport to Southeast Asian countries, and it needs maintenance, repair, and overhaul. It's kind of after-service actions, and this will further enhance defense and security cooperation between Korea and Southeast Asian countries. Of course, some people talk about the military exercise, but that kind of options was not debated in the summit. But anyhow, through all this effort, the further strategic trust can be built between Korea and Southeast Asian countries. So yeah, that is the kind of option we have.
Mm-hmm. But these kinds of expansion, they also bring some kind of economic and diplomatic risks as well, Dr. Lee, especially when it comes to China. So how far do you think South Korea should go strategically, and where is the right balance between economic interests and a strategic engagement?
Oh, that's a very tricky question. That's a kind of a million-dollar question. If I have that answer, a clear answer, wow. Basically, yeah, of course, if South Korea deepens defense and security cooperation with the Philippines, it has got implication for the situation in the South China Sea, and of course, there's a chance for China to make a response to that kind of action done by South Korea. But what South Korea has to do is to making our position known in the region clearly. And we have to keep that position for quite a long time so that the regional countries recognize that South Korea has been taking that sort of position, strategic position in the South China Sea for a long time. If I repeat the point that I made earlier, I'm not talking about the South Korea has to send their naval ships or aircraft to South China Sea, because South Korea is not a claimant country in the South China Sea dispute. So what we can do is to help Southeast Asian countries to enhance their military capability, especially naval and air force capability, so that they can take care of their own sovereignty and national interest in the South China Sea. That's what South Korea has to do.
Mm-hmm. So providing indirect support could be a way of balancing the situation. Now, another major theme of this latest trip was AI, of course. Professor Kim, what strengths do you think South Korea and Singapore would bring to the AI sector?
So both countries have something in similar. We're strong in software. We have the best schools like KAIST and Seoul National University. In Korea, Singapore has National University of Singapore and Nanyang Technology University, etc. We have great talents. What Singapore is missing is the manufacturing sector. We have the best manufacturing industry in the world. So when it comes to physical AI, Singapore needs a lot of help from South Korea because they do not have the manufacturing base. So they do not have anywhere to apply such physical AI technology. So basically, Korea has to manufacture and co-develop the physical AI domain with Singapore. Also, even if it's not physical AI, because two countries are very strong in software engineering, there's a lot of collaboration that we can see in LLM and other type of AI, especially in the race of AI. We can cooperate because Korea or Singapore cannot do it by itself. I think its better model is to cooperate and build a strong AI model together.
But when AI is also seen as a security asset in that kind of context, how do you think the ways of cooperation could change?
So, of course, there's something that we would not like to share with each other. But, what we mean by collaboration AI is naturally going to evolve into a kind of a stronger economic tie and a security tie, because AI is now a new asset, national asset. That's the reason why we're talking about sovereign AI, and we're trying to cultivate the AI industry. So by developing the AI together means that we're really strengthening the relationship. So it has to naturally evolve into some kind of a security framework to have this more realized, I think.
It would even build more trust between the two countries. Now, so looking at the outcomes of the latest trip by President Lee Jae-myung, Professor Kim, how can the outcomes of this trip create real opportunities for Korean companies and startups as well? And what actually needs to happen for these kinds of benefits to spread beyond large conglomerates?
Okay, so Singapore is a really good test bed for Korean companies, I think, and also a collaborative, partner to go global. We were very much focused on the U.S. market when we were talking about going global for startups, especially. But Singapore is the Asia HQ for a lot of large tech companies, say Apple, Google, Facebook, Meta, and et cetera. And they have the capability to widespread it globally because the Asia HQs are there. And so I think that it's a good collaborative model to have Korean startups to work with Singapore more closely to practice how to become truly a global company. It's kind of hard for Korean companies to directly enter the US market and try to become a global company. Singapore, we share a lot of Asian values, and it's much more friendlier for Korean companies to practice being global. So I think that angle should be done immediately. Then we need a lot of government support in that domain. Bilaterally, Singapore, we can discuss visa and talent exchange. And also Singapore has a really good source of investment. So co-investing into Korean startups will help the development of this relationship, I think.
So we'll hope for this to be a good opportunity for South Korean startups and the small companies as well, looking forward. But we'll have to conclude our discussion right here tonight. Thank you so much for your insights, Professor Kim.
Thank you very much.
And of course, Dr. Lee, we really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Till then, stay informed and engaged.
How to survive in Korea. One room. So, you're surviving in Korea. If you signed a contract for a one room, obviously you're a pro. But the real deal begins